My teisho today is on case 9 of the Blue Cliff Record, the Heikigan Roku, sometimes called Joshu's Four Gates. And I'll begin by reading Master Engo's introduction to the case. When the bright mirror is on its stand, beauty and ugliness are distinguished by themselves. With a sharp sword in his hand, one can kill or bring life to fit the occasion. A foreigner goes and a native comes. A foreigner comes and a native goes. In the midst of death he finds life. In the midst of life he finds death. But tell me, when you get to this point, then what? If you don't have the eye to penetrate barriers, if you don't have any place to turn yourself around in, at this point, obviously, you won't know what to do. Tell me, what is the eye that penetrates barriers? What is a place to turn around in? And the main case. A monk asked Joshu, "What is Joshu?" Joshu replied, "East Gate, West Gate, South Gate, North Gate." And Secho's verse on the case. In their words, they show their ability in direct confrontation. The adamantine eye is completely void of dust. East, west, south, north, the gates face each other. An endless series of hammer blows can't smash them open. Well, this case, of course, features a very famous master, Master Joshu. In fact, some people say he was the greatest master ever in the period in which he lived during the Tang Dynasty. And he had a rather interesting life, which began in 778. He was born and was ordained at a relatively young age, and then went traveling from temple to temple, as was the custom at that time. So he learned from a great many masters, including many masters who were disciples of the very famous Matsu, great ancestor Ma. So for decades he traveled and eventually arrived at Nansen's temple. And the story of his encounter with Nansen that produced Joshu's enlightenment experience, I believe, has some bearing on our case today, so I'll share that with you now. It says, one day Joshu asked Nansen, "What is the way?" Nansen said, "Ordinary mind is the way." Joshu said, "Is it still possible to aim for it?" Nansen said, "If you attempt to turn towards it, then you are turning away from it." Joshu said, "When I make no attempt, how will I know it is the way?" Nansen said, "The way is not in the realm of knowing or not knowing. Knowing is false consciousness, and not knowing is insensibility. If it is true arrival on the way where there is no doubt, it is like a great void, like a vacant hall, empty and open. How could one insist on affirming or denying it?" At these words, Joshu awakened to the way. So after this encounter, Joshu stayed on with Master Nansen for a number of years until the latter passed away. And at that point, Joshu was probably close to 60 years old. but with the death of his teacher, he decided to go traveling again. So he wandered again from temple to temple. And he did this for another 20 years. And finally, at the age of 80, he settled down in a temple in northern China, Kuan Yin Temple, and taught there for another 40 years, close to 40 years. He passed away in 897 CE at the age of 118 or 119 years. So very, very long life. Now, some of you may know this name Joshu because he is also the center of another very famous koan, more famous than the one we're working on today, and that's the Mu koan, in which a monk asks him, does a dog have Buddha nature? And he answers Mu, M-U, which meant no or not or nothing. Now, this koan is often given as the very first koan when we start out in koan practice. So we have this monk, in this case, who asks the question, what is Joshu? And it seems to be a very simple, straightforward question, 3 words. What is Joshu? But Master Ango says in his commentaries there are thorns in the soft mud. And of course what he means by that is that things with this monk's question may not be quite what they seem. There may be a lurking danger of some kind. Well, what does that have to do with it? See, Joshu's name, Joshu, was not the one he was given as an infant. Like many other masters of his day, he took the name Joshu from the place where he lived and taught, which was Joshu City. And I believe also it was the name of the prefecture as well. In any case, like many masters, he took that as his personal name. So Joshu is the name of a city, and it's also his personal name. So when the monk asks, what is Joshu? There's a kind of ambiguity in that. It's not clear whether he's referring to the man or to the city in which they live. And so the thorns in the soft mud are all about this ambiguity, and it reveals that this monk knows something about the nature of language. He knows that as soon as you open your mouth, you create separations. You create divisions. Now, this is the nature of language. And in fact, it would be almost impossible for human beings to share any kind of meaning if we didn't have language, and language didn't divide one thing into another. You know, if you say something is hot, that's very different from everything else that isn't. If you say something is high, it's not low. If you say something is broad, it's not narrow. Right is not wrong. So what the monk is wondering about is, how can you answer this question without falling into some kind of duality, without creating some kind of separation, some kind of incomplete expression? Because as soon as we open our mouths, the world is broken into pieces, 2 pieces, this and that. It means that no matter what you say, something will be left out. Something will be missing. No matter what you say, it will be somewhat dissatisfying. That feeling of dissatisfaction is often very subtle, especially in our culture today, because we have so many material advantages. And yet, it is there. We can feel it. Sometimes in the evening, my wife and I sit down to watch TV and I get antsy. And I think it's time to go to the refrigerator and get a snack, even though I'm not hungry. Because our minds translate a kind of hunger for completeness, a hunger for wholeness, into physical hunger. And it can go to great extremes. How is it when a loved one dies? When my son died, I felt quite untethered. The world definitely did not feel complete for a long time. And I remember, you look this way, you look that way. You look for something that will make the picture complete. Even in some versions of the story of the Buddha's life, he also felt this kind of dissatisfaction, this sense that things were not whole, complete. In one version, this is before he became the Buddha. He was not yet enlightened. He was just Siddhartha, living in his father's palace. And he heard a court musician singing a song about her home, her faraway home. And it filled Siddhartha with this great longing, a hunger to come home. Even though everybody around him would have said, but you are at home. This is your father's palace. This is where you live. Not that home. One's spiritual home. So, we have this dilemma of what is perfect, whole, and complete versus this niggling sense of dissatisfaction, this sense that things are not so. And these are the thorns in the mud. Now, Joshu, to his great credit, sees this instantly. He sees the thorns in the mud. And he says, East Gate, West Gate, South Gate, North Gate. Now, it sounds like ostensibly he's answering from the perspective of the city of Joshu. And in fact, that is exactly what the monk thought. Because he went on, it's not part of the case, but he did go on. And he said, I didn't mean that, Joshu. He had this planned. I didn't mean that, Joshu. And Joshu replied, what Joshu did you mean? Now, we don't know if the monk understood after that second statement, But the case doesn't need those extra lines. Just East Gate, West Gate, South Gate, North Gate covers it all. It only seems that it's referring to the city of Joshu. In fact, this statement is undeniably extraordinary. So extraordinary, in fact, that Master Ango says it's like one slash of a diamond sword. Sometimes we call it the Bakuya sword, about which there are many ancient Chinese legends. Most often we probably call Joshu's sword the sword of taking and giving life. And he wields it in an undeniably extraordinary way. Now, if you haven't encountered that trope before, the sword of taking and giving life, you need to think about that a bit. This sword takes the life of delusion, the ego-oriented view of the world, and kills it dead. And at the same time, it gives the life of Buddha. So one cut of this sword made the world whole again. Speaking of whether things are complete or incomplete, my wife recently commented about my videos that she kind of thinks that the blank white wall behind me is sort of austere. So I decided for this video that I would add a calligraphy above the altar, which you could probably see there, yeah. And let me first say I am not a calligrapher. So don't look at that as an example of anything, but I will tell you that what it says. It's a traditional capping phrase that I'm using for this case. And what it says is, one slash of the sword cuts into one piece. Normally we would say a sword cuts things into two pieces, but this capping phrase said it cuts things into one piece. That's the nature of Joshu's diamond sword. That's what it does. That's what his statement, East Gate, West Gate, South Gate, North Gate, does. It cuts a broken world into one whole, perfect world, and is therefore undeniably extraordinary. Now, if you can't see how this is so, you really have to penetrate into these gates. You can visualize them all day long. Men, women, and children pass through these gates. Noblemen and peddlers, rich and poor, horses and donkeys and carts and soldiers all pass through the gates of the city. They go in and out as freely as you can imagine. No hindrance. But if you cannot penetrate into these gates and understand what they're really about, it is as though the gates were closed for the night, locked, and you cannot pass through. This is why Secho says in his verse, even an endless series of hammer blows cannot smash them open. How can that be? What kind of gates are these? Why can't you pass through? Sekida Roshi says it's not because they're not open. It's because of you. Maybe you don't see that you can't open what is already open. You can't free yourself from your own freedom. That's like trying to see your own eyes. Now, I don't know if anyone else has ever talked about this, but I think there's another way to look at Joshu's four gates. You can visualize them as geographical features, but I think that the cross that's made, east to west, south to north, and you're envisioning this square walled city. It's a kind of mandala. And if you don't know what a mandala is, just Google it and you'll see some familiar images, I'm sure. But it's a specific mandala. It's the mandala of the diamond realm, what we call Vajradhatu, or at least a part of the diamond realm, the part that is inhabited by 5 wisdom Buddhas. There's one at the center, and that's Vairochana Buddha. He represents pure Dharmakaya, absolute reality. In the east is Akshobhya Buddha. In the south is Ratnasambhava Buddha. In the west is Amitabha Buddha, Amida Buddha, very important Buddha in Pure Land Buddhism in both China and Japan. And in the north you have Amoghasiddhi Buddha. Now, I was encouraged to start thinking about these 4 gates of Joshu as a diamond realm mandala because Sekida Roshi made a particular comment when he was translating this case. And it had to do with the aspects of enlightened wisdom that these 5 Buddhas represent. Especially Amitabha Buddha and Amoghasiddhi Buddha. And if you understand the nature of their particular enlightened wisdom, you have an opening to the case. So the aspect of enlightened wisdom that Amitabha represents is called marvelous observing wisdom. Marvelous observing wisdom. Marvelous observing wisdom is the wisdom in which you understand the true nature of all things in the universe. And Sekida says, this case also involves the wisdom of Amoghasiddhi Buddha in the north. His wisdom is called perfecting of action wisdom. perfecting of action wisdom. What does that mean? Normally when we think about our actions as sentient beings, we have to acknowledge that we probably have some expectation regarding the outcome of our actions. If I eat food, I expect to feel full. If I express my love for someone, I probably expect them to love me back. These kinds of actions are karmic actions because we have an attachment to the outcome. But Amagosiddhi's perfecting of action wisdom means it's the kind of action that has no attachment to the outcome. The action that Amagosiddhi undertakes is spontaneous and fearless and brings beings to the Buddha Dharma. It's for this reason that he has his hands in the Abhaya Mudra, the mudra of fearlessness. So how do these two aspects of enlightened wisdom pertain to Joshu's undeniably extraordinary statement, his diamond sword? It may take a while to penetrate into this, but this is what the case requires. It requires that you yourself grasp the sword, which is marvelous observing wisdom, and that you swing it freely, which is perfecting of action wisdom, freely taking and giving life. When we do this, we are reflecting everything exactly as it is. We're not adding anything because we don't need to. Everything is already perfect, whole, and complete, as I often say, despite how we may feel. And it's for this reason that Ango says in his commentary, when we're reviling each other, I let you lock lips with me. When we're spitting at each other, I let you spew me with slobber. He'll do anything to be that reflecting mirror, fearlessly. This is Joshu too, not just Ango. So if you penetrate all the way into this, you too will be undeniably extraordinary, just like Joshu. You too will not be obstructed by the gates of your life. You too will open what is open. You too will free yourself from freedom. Really, when you arrive at the center of your city, it could be anywhere. It could be the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, the bedroom. It could be out on the ocean. It could be in the middle of a desert. When you see this, when you really see this, you see that not only have you attained something that is undeniably extraordinary, you were undeniably extraordinary from the very beginning. It was always your true nature. Thank you for listening.